All right, so we're continuing again with the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, and we're in the chapter with the devotees at Dakshineshwar, and we're at June 8th, 1883.
Page number, please.
Page number 239. 239. It was a summer day. The evening service in the Kali temple was over. Sri Ramakrishna stood before the image of the Divine Mother and waved the fan just a few more minutes after Arati. Ram, Kedar Chatterjee, and Tarak arrived from Calcutta with flowers and sweets. Kedar was about 50 years old. At first, he had frequented the Brahmo Samaj and joined other religious sects in his search for God. But later, he had accepted the master as his spiritual guide. He was an accountant in a government office and lived in a suburb of Calcutta. Tarak was a young man of 24. His wife had died shortly after their marriage. He hailed from the village of Barasat, not far from Calcutta. His father, a highly spiritual soul, had visited Sri Ramakrishna many times. Tarak often went to Ram's house and used to go to Dakshineshwar in the company of Ram and Nitya Gopal. He worked in a business firm, but his attitude toward the world was one of utter indifference. As Sri Ramakrishna came out of the temple, he saw Ram and Kedar and M and Tarak and the other devotees standing outside. He showed his affection for Tarak by touching his chin. He was very happy to see him. Returning to his room, the master sat on the floor in an ecstatic mood. His legs were stretched out before him. Ram and Kedar decorated his feet with flowers and with garlands. The master was in samadhi. What an interesting thing! I just saw. That was what I saw the day I went to visit Moksha Prana back in 1999. You know, when I had my advent to this whole spiritual journey. That Ma Moksha Prana was sitting there meditating in her chair, and her feet were on a small stool, and there was a woman there doing a beautiful flower petal mandala around her feet on the floor while she was weeping. It's just kind of cool to see this. A mandala is that I don't know technically what a mandala is. Does anybody know? It's one of those round, repeating pattern type decorations. Usually the Tibetan Buddhists do them out of colored sand. It's
called Rangoli, Swami.
What's that?
It's called Rangoli, I think.
Rangoli?
Yeah.
Do you know what it is they're actually drawing, or does it have, do you know any, if there's
It's often done freehand. In the south, it's usually done with a mix of some kind of chalky substance and rice flour. It's only white, and it's a lot of lines, and it's not filled in. But in the north and in some other states in the south, they do it with colors, and it's filled in, and they have patterns and designs.
Right.
Yeah. It's a decoration, Swami, and it's artistic, and it's auspicious. That's all it is.
Yeah. Well, I the times I've seen it being done quite a few times, it seems to be a practice of intense concentration.
Yes.
Here's one definition. A mandala is an artistic representation of higher thought and deeper meaning, given as a geometric symbol used in spiritual, emotional, or psychological work to focus one's attention. The image first appears in India via the Hindu text known as the Rig Veda.
Wow, so it's an old practice. Wow.
Yeah.
I think that what's usually drawn on the floor in entrances and in big halls is called a Rangoli and not a mandala.
Okay. Yeah, it was so anyway, here we have them doing these around the master's feet. So it must be it's a form of worship, I guess, a form of reverence, a form of celebration. even of the person, of the character. The master was in samadhi. Kedar believed in certain strange practices of a religious sect to which he had once belonged. He held the master's big toe in his hand, believing that in this way the master's spiritual power would be transmitted to him. As Sri Ramakrishna regained partial consciousness, he said, "Mother, what can he do to me by holding my toe?" Kedar sat humbly with his hands folded. Still in an ecstatic mood, the master said to Kedar, "Your mind is still attracted by woman and gold. What is the use of saying you don't care for it? Go forward, beyond the forest of sandalwood. There are many more things, mines of silver, gold, diamonds, and other precious stones. Having a glimpse of spirituality, don't think you have attained everything." The master was again in an ecstatic mood. He said to the Divine Mother, "Mother, take him away." At these words, Kedar's throat dried up. In a frightened tone, he said to Ram, "What is the master saying?" At the sight of Rakal, Sri Ramakrishna was again overpowered with a spiritual mood. He said to his beloved disciple, "I have been here many days. When did you come?" Was the master hinting that he was an incarnation of God, and that Rakal, his divine companion, and a member of his inner circle of devotees? You know, this is another one of those difficult situations. You know, poor Kedar here. You know, but it's an interesting thing because it seems like Kedar was in a certain place that he'd been in for a while. You know, where he was resisting his love of the world or his desire for the world. But there's a difference between resisting and renouncing. You know, there's a difference between kind of pushing and keeping it at bay and banishing it. You know, and in the master's teaching here, you know, he tells him, you know, what is the use of saying that you don't care for it? This is that inner integrity, your inner truth. Be honest with yourself about where you're at. You know, you can't grow without honesty. You can't renounce without honesty. And so he's saying, what's the use of pretending that you don't want it when you do want it? Go forward, which means when you're resisting all of these desires that are still there within you, if you're just resisting them and pushing them, you've got your back facing forward, and your attention is on your resistance and on your overcoming and on you know, fighting these realities that are within you. And I think the master's telling him, stop pretending that this resistance is the way to do it, and tells him, go forward, which means turn your back on those things. Be done with them. Don't resist them. Be done with them and banish them. You know, and he says, by turning around them, turning your back on these things, making that formal decision, this is not for me. I'm not interested in this. I'm not going to do it. And to put that into action by turning yourself around and facing forward toward the divine. And he says here, go forward, which means stop facing your past and pushing against it. Turn around and face this infinite potential of your future, you know, by completely turning your back on and banishing these things that you're playing with through your resistance, you know. And he says, and put your eyes on what lies ahead there, the forest of sandalwood. There are many more things, you know. Beyond the forest of sandalwood, there are many more things, mines of silver, gold, diamonds, and other precious stones. You know, stop looking at the world and resisting it, because your attention is still on the world. Turn around. Banish those things from yourself. Know that you're finished. Accept that you will never do them again. And put your eyes on this infinite gold, this infinite beauty, this infinite potential of things that will manifest as you step forward in incredible ways, that you'll become aware of things that you never imagined even existed within you. And I think that's our invitation. You know, this is harmonizing a little bit with how I feel inside. I almost feel like this is sort of a description from the master of what I've been going through in the last few days. You know, of this notion of just being done. Stop making the effort of one of resistance, where you're just kind of toying with these things, but you're not renouncing them. You're just keeping them at bay. And that's taking your attention and keeping you facing in the wrong direction. Be done with them. Banish them from your mind and face forward. You know, face forward. This infinite potential that you have. Go to the shrine in the heart. You know, that's where forward is. Forward is going to the shrine, going to the self, following the mantra, following your breath into that secret room within you, that long forgotten space of absolute security, of absolute strength, of absolute quiet, absolute peace. It's the source of your bliss, the source of your being. Sunday, June 10th, 1883. The master was sitting in his room with Rakal, M, Latu, Kishori, Ramlal, Hausara, and other devotees. It was about 10 o'clock in the morning. Describing his early life, Sri Ramakrishna said to them, "During my younger days, the men and women of Karmarpur were equally fond of me. They loved to hear me sing. I could imitate other people's gestures and conversation, and I used to entertain them in that way. The women would put aside things for me to eat. No one distrusted me. Everybody took me in as one of the family. But I was like a happy pigeon. I used to frequent only happy families. I would run away from a place where I saw misery and suffering. One or two young boys of the village were my close friends. I was very intimate with some of them, but now they're totally immersed in worldliness. A few of them visit me here now and then, and they say, 'Goodness, he seems to be just the same as he was when he was in the village school. While I was at school, arithmetic would throw me into confusion. But I could paint very well, and I could also model small images of the deities. I loved to visit the free eating places maintained for the holy men and the poor, and I would watch them for hours. I loved to hear the reading of sacred books, such as the Ramayana and the Bhagavata. If the readers had any affectations, I could easily imitate them and would entertain others with my mimicry. I understood the behavior of women very well, and I imitated their words and their intonations. I could easily recognize immoral women. Immoral widows part their hair in the middle and perform their toilet with great care. They have very little modesty. The way they sit is so different. But let's not talk of worldly things right now." I wish he'd said that about 2 sentences earlier. The master asked Ramlal to sing, and so Ramlal sang. "Who is this terrible woman, dark as the sky at midnight? Who is this woman dancing over the field of battle, like a blue lotus that floats on a crimson sea of blood? Who is she, clad alone in the infinite for a garment, rolling her 3 great eyes in frenzy and savage fury? Under the weight of her tread, the earth itself is trembling. Shiva, her mighty husband, who wields the fearful trident, lies like a helpless corpse beneath her conquering feet."
Swami, I have a comment.
Yes.
And when it's above, when it says that some of his old friends visit him,
Uh-huh.
and they say, "Goodness, he seems to be just the same as he was at the village school." I think it's an example of, if you're not meant to see it, you're not going to see it. you know, it's like, why doesn't everyone adore Ramakrishna? You know, it's like, it's God decides who's, I don't know, you get the point.
I do. I do. And I think that definitely can be found in there. And it is a truth, you know, that it's like that, what Swami Prabhupada said when we were sitting in that devotee's library. And I commented to him, "Oh, look at all these books this guy owns." And Swami looked around and smiled. He said, "Yes, but he will only be able to read the ones that his karma allows." You know, and so there's a little bit
Yes,
of that. But I also think that this is about, you know, a person who's dedicated to spiritual life develops in a different way, especially if they've renounced, you know, if they've taken the path of renunciation. And, you know, in some sense, they can be more playful. They can be more free because, you know, they're not stressed with paying the mortgage. They're not stressed with how things are going with the boss at work. They're not having to maintain a family, to discipline their children, you know, to pay everybody's bills and keep the food flowing, you know, working themselves for all of these, the fulfillment of desires for not just themselves, but their whole family. And I think that makes you grow up, you know, in a way that someone like Thakur, who didn't have to do that, that his life of renunciation and surrender put all of that at mother's feet in a very real way, and left him fresh, like a child, like he was back in his school days. You know, you can see as we read about the master, there's a playfulness to him. There's a funness around his life in some ways. There's also a raw and deep wisdom, you know, and a terrifying level of renunciation and self-control on his part. But his reliance on the mother has turned his life into a playground almost. And I think when someone in the world encounters someone like that, you know, they're like, wow, God, he's just like he used to be. You know, he hasn't grown up in the sense of become too severe under his burden to be responsible, you know, to play the worldly game. And that this freshness was quite striking in Thakur, you know, that he could be 50 years old, but he looked and acted like he was still in his 20s, but with a fierce renunciation and an amazing self-control, you know, but that allowed for a true surrender where he just really didn't worry about things, didn't have to be concerned, because he truly believed that mother was in charge, that mother was doing and caring and taking control and providing for him. And I don't think that has to be unique to a monastic. I think that a householder can also experience that, but it's much more difficult in the householder path to stay in that space. You know, because it does seem, your responsibility seems much closer to you. You know, that you are the source of money. It's not the monastery is the source of money. It's like you are the source of money and you're the source. And so the ego can grab onto those things much more easily and then become worried, become convinced that he is the one responsible and that he is the one that has to grow up and he is the one that has to, you know, take the handlebars and make sure this family makes it forward. But the truth for both is the same. The Divine Mother is taking care of you. And you know, I think this difference was striking to his playmates, and I think also from Thakur's side, it was quite striking when he looked at them and saw that they weren't the playful, loving, you know, children in spirit, you know, and that might be mirrored in the words of Jesus, that unless you become like these little children, you cannot enter the kingdom of God. Which means if you don't give the responsibility to your parents to take care of you, meaning God, meaning the Divine Mother, that you're going to stay in that mind space. You're going to stay identified by the changing world around you and not by who you are, not by your inner nature. not by what flows from the inside out as opposed from the outside in. And so he saw the difference in them and they saw the difference in him. And now we see the difference in both of them. And it just gives a good idea here. Don't forget, there's a beautiful side to your surrender, and that is your freedom. There's a beautiful side to your renunciation, and that is your infinite potential of going forward and finding this infinite storehouse of treasure within. And so in all of our practice and in all of our focusing on the divine, don't forget to play. Don't forget your freedom. Don't forget the light that is apparent through these practices. Don't forget to enjoy your beloved. The next song described the grief of Mandodari at the death of her husband Ravana. As he listened to it, the master shed tears of sorrow and said, "Once when I entered the pine grove over there, I heard the boatman on the Ganges singing that song and wept bitterly for a very long time. I had to be brought back to my room." Let's think about that. The story, he's hearing it, and he's just so moved to such deep tears that he has to be brought back to his room for consolation. That's an open heart. That's an unprotected heart. That's a heart that's really willing to feel, not just for others, but even the ideas of others' suffering, of others' pain. That's a very pure person. Ramlal sang about the love of the gopis for Sri Krishna. Akrura was about to drive Sri Krishna in a chariot from Vrindavan to Mathura. The gopis would not let him go. Some held the wheels of the chariot, some lay down in front of it. They blamed Akrura, not knowing that Sri Krishna was leaving them of his own will. Akrura was explaining this to the gopis. Ramlal sang, hold not the chariot's wheels. Is it the wheels that make it move? The mover of its wheels is Krishna, by whose will the worlds are moved." This is kind of a metaphor here in a way that you could look at, comparing it to that idea of non-resistance, of accepting the moment as it is. Stop taking control of the moment through your attachments and trying to grab the wheels of time and karma, which are being driven by the beloved, by the divine. To see that all of this that is in the hands of the divine. Surrender to it, accept it, open to it, and go forward in it. Non-resistance to whatever this moment brings for you. About the gopis, the master said, "What deep love. What an ecstatic devotion they had for Krishna." Radha painted the picture of Sri Krishna with her own hand, but did not paint his legs, lest he should run away to Mathurai. I used to sing these songs very often in my boyhood. I could reproduce the whole drama from memory. After his meal, Sri Ramakrishna sat on the couch. He had not yet found time to rest. The devotees began to assemble. One party arrived from Maniranpur and another from Bulgaria. Some of the devotees said, "We have disturbed your rest." The master, "Oh no, what you say applies only to a Rajasic man. About him, people say, now he will enjoy his sleep." The devotees from Manirampur asked the master how to realize God. The master, "You must practice spiritual discipline a little." You must practice spiritual discipline a little. It will not do simply to say that milk contains butter. You must let the milk set into curd and then churn it. Only then can you get the butter from it. Spiritual aspirants must go into solitude now and then. After acquiring love of God in solitude, they may live in the world. If one is wearing a pair of shoes, one can easily walk over thorns. So this whole idea here, look what he says, it will not do simply to say that milk contains butter. You know, it's the words, it's not enough just to say your mantra. Know that there's know the power of the change in that presence. Know the power of protection in that presence. Know the infinity of love that is in that presence. Know that. Don't just repeat a word. Don't just do your practice. Don't just get things finished. Know what you're touching. Know what you're seeing, even if you're not recognizing it. Know the reality of what you're playing with, and let it run you over. You know, let it turn you to curd, to butter. Yeah. We're not playing with the small thing. We're not playing with the small thing. The most important thing is faith, he says. And this is exactly what we were talking about earlier. Know these things to be true. Know them to be true. Know that the presence of God is fundamental. It is not to be questioned, not to be seen, not to be tested, not to be wondered about, not to be constructed, imagined, or built. It is. That's the most important thing. Know this truth is in you. Know this reality is the reality. Nothing that you've imagined, nothing that you've experienced, no plans you've laid, no foundations of your future. None of those are real. Know them absolutely to be unreal. The only thing real is that silent, eternal space within you that has never changed, that has held your sense of I in a lockbox. As the world, body, and mind changed around it, the most important thing is faith. As is a man's meditation, so is his feeling of love. Okay? Because that love is your nature, and that meditation is your silence. And in that silence, your love as your source, not a thing that you have, but a thing that you are, will manifest, will become apparent to you. In that meditation, in that silence, in that sitting in patient faith in the presence of God, you'll become aware of what you are. That you are that pure love. You don't act that way. It's what you are. As is a man's feeling of this love, as is a man's awareness of that perfect love that is in the shrine of the heart, so is his gain. That means, yes, that's the direction. That is beginning to know yourself. And faith is the root of it all. That knowing, that being willing to let go of doubt. And even more so, not just letting go of doubt, but also letting go of any attempt to create this love or to manifest this love, because that's not necessary. This love is, and faith is knowing that. So it's why it's very important to tie that together with what we read in Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, that we're not sitting to realize God. We're sitting to know that we are already realized. You know, within us, we've got the two parts. They're not really two parts, they're one, but fire and its power to burn, right, exist within you. Within you is that absolute unchanging. That is the shrine of the heart, the source of the mantra. And within you is the active mind, the ever-changing, non-repeating world. That is Shakti. They both exist within you. As long as you stay rooted with your identity in the changing, in the mind, where you define yourself by thought, by Q&A, in that space, God cannot be seen because you're constantly distracted by the change and flash of color. But in that silent space in there, you move out, you move your sense of I, you stop describing yourself with words and thoughts, and you no longer have to describe yourself at all because you are yourself. And in that silence, you become aware, and that's the feeling of love. As your awareness of this reality of yourself gathers your attention, that feeling of love wells up. And to the degree that it wells up, to that degree you're going forward until you're overwhelmed, like Thakur, in these spiritual states, these ecstasies and samadhis. All they are is his widening awareness of the love that he is. And that love is infinite. And so it will overwhelm the body mind. It will cause a samadhi as such. If one has faith, one has nothing to fear. The devotee. Sir, is it necessary to have a guru? Master. Yes, yes. Many need a guru. But a man must have faith in the guru's words. Again, that faith, that assumption of truth in your guru. He succeeds in spiritual life by looking on his guru as God himself. It's not just another man's opinion. It's not just an idea, but to look on the guru as the hand of the beloved, which means bring the guru inside with you. Bring the words of the guru to the shrine of the heart and know them to be true. Therefore, the Vaishnavas speak of Guru, Krishna, and Vaishnava. One should constantly repeat the name of God. Constantly repeat the name of God. We talked a little bit about that last time, because this name of God is God. Name and form cannot be separated. And so when you run the name of God through the mind reverberates with the presence of God. And you keep paying attention to that. You keep paying attention to that. And you bring it with you all the time. You shouldn't, I like to say, well, actually of late, don't let your mind wander more than one or two thoughts away from the mantra. You know, don't let more than two thoughts occur in succession before the mantra is sounded within. That will keep you in the presence. That will save you from the distraction of the infinite change of the mind, which is so interesting. So entertaining. You know, it's like going into Facebook or
All right, how do you do that when you have a whole bunch of people around you eating together? But when I'm by myself, it comes up automatically. But when I'm surrounded with people and people talking, that's when for a while it doesn't.
Right. Well, use them. Use the thing that is distracting you to remind you. Change the nature of it. You know, instead of seeing them as making noise and distracting you and pulling out of yourself, see them as Thakurs and Mas playing a part in a play that you're witnessing. You know, whatever they're talking about is unimportant. Don't worry about that. And know then, bring them inside. Know that they are all inside of you. Right? They are opposing thoughts. They are opposing distractions of your mind. And how do we stop the opposing distractions of mind? By putting our mind on the mantra.
But Swami, you're not suggesting that while I'm listening to this class, I'm doing my mantra.
Oh, surely.
Oh, well, okay.
Why not? He says constantly. Pray without ceasing. Yes, you know, Thakur Thakur gives that example of that miller's wife who's working in the mill, you know, and he says that she's serving a customer and giving change to the customer from the till. At the same time, she's nursing a baby in her left arm, and with her right arm, she's taking the pounded rice out of the wheel of the mill and putting the unpounded rice in so that it can be pounded. And she's doing all of this at the same time. And so he says, in the same way, give a section of a portion of your mind to the constant repetition of the name of God, to the constant remembrance of the beloved, and carry on with the rest of it. You know, that your mind is, if you look at all that your mind is actually doing right now, you're not aware of probably more than half of it. You know, your mind is making sure the nutrients are getting to all the different parts of the body. It's keeping the lungs going. It's keeping the heart pumping. It's keeping everything fed and taken care of. It's repairing broken cells. It's building new muscle. I mean, the mind is your functioning of your body is complex and seemingly infinite. And so Thakur says, understand that. It's not that you have to, it's not that you can only do one thing at a time. Do them, but make sure that thought of God is always the defining presence for what you're doing. Put everything within that mantra as you're carrying on, you know, because that mantra is what holds you. It's so imperative, actually. It's so imperative because that mantra is what holds you in the arms of Mother. Without that, without the mantra running, you're just a toddler running all over the playroom while Mama sits over in the corner doing what she's doing. But the mantra will keep you in her lap. And you might reach for a toy occasionally, but you won't leave the lap. So that mantra is your safety. That mantra is what will allow you to be aware of your nature of bliss. That mantra is what will allow you to escape time. That mantra is what will take you to the shrine, where you find the source of it. Yeah.
Good clarification. I'm glad this came up.
Yeah.
Although I bet you're not doing your mantra while you're talking to us.
Oh yeah, I am.
Really? Well, that takes practice.
Yeah. Well, it's yeah. I mean, it's not a difficult thing to do. It's not a sensational thing to do. You know, it's more subtle sometimes, you know, but I'm in the room with Thakur while I'm reading these things and seeing them, and that's a form of mantra. That's the presence, you know, of the divine. And when I feel a distraction from the presence, the mantra kicks in for that.
Thank you, Swami.
Yeah. One should constantly repeat the name of God. The name of God is highly effective in the Kali Yuga. That's this age. The practice of yoga is not possible in this age, for the life of a man depends on food. Clap your hands while repeating God's name, and the birds of your sin will fly away. See, he's saying your mantra is your safety. Your mantra is what keeps your mind from creating states and story that entice you into manipulating the present in order for a desired result in the future. It's the mantra that keeps you in the now. Because the name of God is I am. And that is what's being exerted every time that mantra is sounded. Hafiz says every time you say the name of God, every time you repeat the mantra, it's like running your soul through cheesecloth. It becomes more pure every single time. One should always seek the company of holy people. The nearer you approach the Ganges, the cooler the breeze will feel. The closer you get to that silent mind, the closer you get to the center of the shrine in your heart, the more refreshing, the more bliss, the more comfort, the more confidence, the less fear you will experience. So the mantra is your means of reaching these places. Again, the nearer you go to a fire, the hotter the air will feel, right? And the heat that we're talking about here is what he said earlier in that little song. As is a man's feeling of love, so is his gain. So that love is the heat of the fire. The more love that you feel inside, which manifests in the sense of bliss, the closer you're getting to the center of your being, the closer you're getting to silence, the closer you're getting to the presence, to that all-encompassing presence. But one cannot achieve anything through laziness and procrastination. Can't achieve anything if you take it easy, if you don't practice some discipline and some renunciation. If you're lazy about your practice, if you can easily miss it, you're not going to find this gold. You're not going to see these gems. If you're not tenacious about your practice, if you don't demand it of yourself, God is not a casual acquisition. It requires real love. It requires real inspiration, and that can only happen when you're sincere and earnest in your effort, in your practice. One cannot achieve anything through laziness and procrastination. People who desire worldly enjoyment say about spiritual progress, well, it'll happen in time. We'll realize God in some time or other. I said to Keshab Sen, when a father sees that his son has become restless for his inheritance, he gives him his share of the property even 3 years before the legal time. A mother keeps on cooking while the baby is in the bed sucking its toy. But when it throws the toy away and cries for her, she puts down the rice pot and takes the baby in her arms and nurses it. I said all of this to Keshab. So when you throw down the world, when you're not content just to be comfortable, when you're not content just to successfully make it through another day, you're not content to lay there sleeping in the morning and skipping your practice, right? Or all these things. I could name 1,000 ways my mind has played these tricks on me over these years. But we have to push past it. If you're casual about it, if your spiritual life is a casual endeavor that often gets pushed out of the way to make room for other things, or often doesn't get done because you got busy with other things. What a shame, that's all. How unlucky for us to tolerate that in ourselves, because it just means that we have to live in this suffering and this misery that much longer, needlessly, because you carry the gems with you all the time. Why seek them elsewhere? Why think that sleeping in is going to give you more pleasure than that meditation would have, and more satisfaction than that practice would have? It is said that in the Kali Yuga, if a man can weep for God one day and one night, he sees him. If you can keep if you can keep yourself in the presence of God, which is all you need for weeping. It's a weeping of inspiration. It's a weeping of happiness and amazement. If you can just keep yourself in that presence, for one day and one night. Now that is a big accomplishment, but we hold that as an ideal, hold that in front of ourselves, because that's all it takes for your realization. You will see God. The Master is telling you from his very own mouth, you will see me if you can want me for one day and one night continuously, to the point of weeping. All right. Let's see. Feel piqued at God and say to him, you have created me. Now you must reveal yourself to me. Whether you live in the world or elsewhere, always fix your mind on God. The mind soaked in worldliness may be compared to a wet matchstick. You won't get a spark, however much you may rub it. Ekalavya placed the clay image of Drona, his teacher, in front of him, and thus learned archery. Go forward, The woodcutter, following the instructions of the holy man, went forward and found in the forest sandalwood and mines of silver and gold. And going still farther, he found diamonds and other precious things. The ignorant are like people living in a house with clay walls. There is very little light inside, and they cannot see outside at all. But those who enter the world after attaining the knowledge of God are like people living in a house made of glass. For them, both inside and outside are light. They can see things outside as well as inside. Nothing exists except the One. That One is the Supreme Brahman. So long as he keeps the I in us, he reveals to us that it is he who is the primal energy, who creates, preserves, and destroys the universe. That which is Brahman is also the primal energy. So that which is still mind is also active mind. Once a king asked a yogi to impart knowledge to him in one word. The yogi said, all right, you will get knowledge in one word. After a while, a magician came to the king. The king saw the magician moving two of his fingers rapidly and heard him exclaim, behold, O king, behold. The king looked at him amazed when after a few minutes he saw the two fingers become one. The magician moved that one finger rapidly and said, behold, O king, behold. The implication of the story is that Brahman and the primal energy at first appear to be two, but after attaining the knowledge of Brahman, one does not see the two. Then there is no difference, no differentiation. It is one without a second, Advaita, non-duality. And we'll stop there for this evening.